All right, Chardonnay. You either love it or you hate it. But the people that hate Chardonnay really only hate bad Chardonnay. That'd be like saying that you hate rock and roll because all you've ever heard of is Hoopastank. Hoopastank arguably sucks. There's a lot of other really great rock music out there, right? One of the reasons for this and why Chardonnay has become so polarized is because of what was known as was known as the Judgment of Paris in 1976. Essentially, you had a wine critic that pitted American winemakers against French. The French winemakers were from Bordeaux for the reds and Burgundy for the whites. So essentially Cabernet Sauvignon, maybe a little bit Merlot blended in there, but Cab was the dominant grape, and then Chardonnay from Burgundy. They were pitted against Napa Valley, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Chardonnay. In a huge upset, these wines were all blind tasted. Everyone wrote their scores. The California wines beat the French. It was a huge scandal in France, and it really highlighted this region in Northern California called the Napa Valley, where winemakers there at the time were basically skirting bankruptcy all day, every day, because no one really cared about them. Suddenly, there's all of this emphasis on, holy crap, this is going to be known as one of the greatest winemaking regions on the planet, and all this money came into the valley, and people started planting vineyards everywhere. That's fine up to a point with Cabernet Sauvignon. Cab kind of does great wherever. However, with Chardonnay, that was disastrous. And the reason for that is Chardonnay is known as being one of the most bland grape varieties in existence. It has no inherent flavor. And what that means is that it matters where it's planted. So if you plant it just anywhere, you're going to get very bland juice. American winemakers didn't have a comprehension of that, mainly because of capitalism, damn the man. You could make money. So we just went where the money was at. That's all that they cared about. And so they fermented this juice that was planted in the wrong places, and it tasted like nothing. Well, how do you change a wine that you've already fermented, you've already gone through the process of making it? How do you imbue flavor to it? Well, you put it in new French oak barrels. New French oak barrels imparts flavor. It's kind of like marinating a steak. Still a steak, but you fundamentally change the flavor of that steak. And the flavor profiles that new French oak imparts on a wine is buttery, vanilla, baking spices. So that then became the dominant flavor profile of all of these really poorly made Chardonnays. Now, if you're just getting into wine, all of those flavor profiles actually sound pretty appealing. There's a sweetness to them. And they're so simple that it's easy for us to grasp what those flavor profiles are. Those wines are not about subtlety. They are exaggerations of flavor, right? So it's very easy to connect with that. The truth is that Chardonnay, planted in the proper spots, can be radically complex, can be incredibly long aged, and I would argue one of the greatest white wines on the planet. Even if they're made with 100% new oak, even with those notes, the wines can be ethereal. So it's not that you hate Chardonnay, you just hate bad Chardonnay. So let's talk about great Chardonnay. If Chardonnay is planted in the right spots, it tastes like orchard fruit. You can get green apple, you can get pear. It can taste like bright lemon, Meyer lemon. It has this liveliness to it, this acidic kick that can be so seductive. And what's interesting is that Chardonnays also don't have to be just fruit-forward wines. A lot of people don't know this, but you hear these guests that come into restaurants and they go, I hate Chardonnay, but I love Sauvignon Blanc, and ooh, I love Chablis. What they don't realize is that Chablis is actually made with Chardonnay grapes, 100% Chardonnay grapes. And that's how crazy Chardonnay is, and how it's a chameleon grape. Because it's planted there, it's planted on a particular soil called Kimmeridgian. It's also planted on Portlandian, so the two soils there, to be fair, Portlandian, Kimmeridgian, but Kimmeridgian is the good stuff. Kimmeridgian is limestone mixed with fossilized seashells. And because it's planted on that soil, the wines are radically mineral and really not very fruit forward. They're crisp like a Sauvignon Blanc. That's just because of the soil. You actually can't mimic Chablis anywhere else in the world because of the soil type. All right, and if a guest comes in and asks about Chardonnay, the best way to ascertain exactly what they want is to ask essentially, do you want cooler climate or old world, or do you want warmer climate or new world? If they're looking for something old world, Italy, France, that is an indication that they want wines that are more on the mineral side, more of the acidic side, versus if they say, I want new world, which Napa Valley is a great example, Sonoma, those wines are just going to be a little bit more fruit forward. It's not to say, again, that they're going to be bad, but they're going to be balanced with fruit and acid. You go old world, you're getting more of that minerality, that acidity, and the fruit is a little more subtle. So the last thing is pairings. What do you pair Chardonnay with? Well, in my opinion, anything. If you are having a grilled steak, you can have a Chardonnay with a little bit of age on it, perfect. Chardonnay is one of the primary grape varieties in Champagne. Champagne and steak, amazing. Chicken, pasta, pizza, it really doesn't matter. This chameleon grape goes with a vast majority of foods. The one thing that you want to remember is that if it is a fuller bodied Chardonnay, we're gonna call that fat, with a higher acid dish, acid and fat pair together really, really well. Acid and acid pair together really well. So oysters with lemon squeezed over the top and Chablis, one of life's greatest joys. What you don't want to do is fat on fat. So if you have a dish that has a ton of butter in it, and then you have that oakier style Chardonnay, that buttery Chardonnay, it's essentially like eating deep fried butter. No one wants that. All right, go out there and distill the myth of Chardonnay. Cheers.